Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton. I'm really excited about this deck profile. Fate Apocrypha is one of the most underrated sets, I think, in all of English Weiss. I've been working on this deck for a while, and I feel really good about it. Let's get right to it. The object of this deck is to get level 3s on the board as early as possible. We have a lot of early play options, as well as a level 3 combo that swings big with modulated damage that lets us choose how much damage we swing for, as well as a couple of extra burn effects. A lot of power going into the end game of this deck, and a lot of setup in the mid game to make it happen. It's a decently competitive list. Apocrypha has a lot of versatility. It has a lot of options. It doesn't have anything that really is world shaking, so it doesn't really appear in the world's meta. Definitely something that you can take to a shop. Definitely something that I think that is in play at Trios Regionals. Not sure. It's right there when it comes to something that you could play and compete with at regionals. The deck has the pieces and it has the synergy. As far as the cost of this deck goes, it's decently expensive. It's about what you would spend on a competitive deck, maybe a little bit less. I think this is a competitive list. I think it's one that can do well in competitive environments. It's not super budget friendly, but I think that it's something worth playing. The deck wins by getting its early plays down and having a lot of options to close out the game with burn damage at the end game. Modulated burn damage with the level 3 combo that lets you more or less pick and choose how much damage you're swinging for. The mid game is all about a level 1 combo that lets us plus multiple times with each instance, and there are a lot of hand fixed resources that let us sculpt our hand so that we have exactly what we want when we want it. The level 0 game in Apocrypha is fantastic. It's one of the best level 0 games in all of English Weiss, in my opinion. There's a lot of utility here and a lot of options. You can really craft something based on what you want to do and the profiles that you like and the cards that you like. Probably the most important card at level 0 for us is this Brimming with Confidence Saber of Red. We run 4 of it. On play, it scries the top card. You can put it back on top of the deck or put it into waiting room. It's a little bit of mill, also fixes triggers for certain swings, and makes sure that your climaxes don't go to stock on attack. The most important part of this card is its on-play Ricky effect. Pay 1, clock the top card, which you will have just checked to make sure that you aren't putting a climax or something else that you don't want in clock. It helps us get to level 1 so that we can get our level 1 combo off. Our level 1 combo is small. We don't have a ton of power there. We want to get to level 1 as quickly as possible so that we can get our reverses and get our pluses off. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to level 1. This next card is the level 0 Saint Ruler. We run 3 of these. A lot of what Apocrypha does is based on flipping cards in your level. It's the cost for some of our hand fixing effects. It's also how we modulate our damage in the endgame. So it's really important that we have this card specifically because it flips cards back over, especially in the mid game. There's a level 1 archer card that we use to help fix our hand that relies on flipping cards. We need to be able to flip them back in order to keep our colors available to us and also to control the amount of damage that we're swinging for when we get to the end game. So this card's really important. It also gives us basically a universal 500 for all of our master and servant characters. Almost all of our characters in this deck have one of these 2 traits. The next really important card is the Like Scattered Petals Berserker of Black. We run 4 of these Frankensteins. It's an on-death Akatsuki. When it dies, when it goes to waiting room specifically, you pitch 1, look at the top 4, and you can add a character from those 4 cards into your hand. It's not the most efficient way to get through your deck all the time. Ideally, what you'll want to do is you want to put it into the front row, force your opponent to reverse it, so that all you have to do is when it goes to waiting room, you can pitch a card and look at the top 4. It's a good way to get stuff out of your hand that you don't want, extra climaxes, level 3s, and get something that we have a lot more use for. It can also be used, especially in the endgame, as a way to get the pieces that we need for the endgame. Play over it, send it to waiting room, pitch a card, especially at the end when we're willing to put all of our resources in to try to make our final push. This card can be really helpful because it can get us those things that we need. Next up, we run 2 of the Brainstormer. Really straightforward, pay 1, rest 1, salvage. It does give 500 power to our middle character. It also can't be targeted. It's a Brainstormer. We don't need the Brainstormer as much in this list because we have a lot of other hand fixing and we have a lot of other mill, especially that Frankenstein. But it can be really helpful in certain situations, especially if we're well compressed. We know we're going to hit. Maybe we revealed a climax with the Mordred top check. In any case, it's a Brainstormer. It has utility for us. It's helpful to have. Next is this other Mordred, Quick Judgment Saber of Red. We run 2 of these. There are a lot of different options for keeping field at level 0. in this set. We'll talk about a couple of those other options a little later on. But this one is my favorite. It's a clean cut. When it reverses a character, you move another character to your back row. It's really straightforward, hits every time you get a reverse. It keeps stuff in the field so that we can push it forward later, or we can leave it in the back row, especially if it's a support piece like the level flip ruler, or the brainstormer, or the self-tap power pump that we'll get to in a second. There are a lot of pieces in this list that we don't necessarily want to lose in the front row, but we need to put them at level 0 because we don't have other options. This helps us save those cards and get the maximum utility possible out of them. This is that self-tap power pump. These are 2018 BCS promos, really nice looking cards. We run 2 of them. These really help us get our reverses at level 1 because our level 1 combo is dependent on those reverses. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, self-tap gives 1500 to a character. Also pretty big in its own right. Can play in the front row if we need it to. Nice utility to have, especially going into our level 1 game. Finally, we run 1 of the Drop Searcher. A Drop Searcher is a useful inclusion in almost any list just because it solves problems. It gets us pretty much anything we need. We'd rather not pay 1 pitch 1 to get a character, but if we absolutely need to, this option's available to us. This is really our only search access to our deck. Most of what we do is salvage. If we need to go get something out of our deck and this is already in our waiting room, usually really easy to go get this if we absolutely need it. So moving into level 1, the primary focus here, get this Astolfo combo off. If we get it off, we plus cards and we get the resources that we need to really get our endgame underway. There are a couple other pieces here as well that we will talk about, but the most important one is Outstretched Hand Astolfo. We run 4. When the book climax is in play, on reverse, it checks the top card. If it's a character, we add it to hand, and then when it's attacked on our opponent's next turn, we can bounce it back into our hand. So it pluses itself into our hand, and usually the top card of the deck as well. So great way to get 4 to 6 cards in hand if we tri-field this. It also sets up an early play for us because if this card, which we just bounced back into our hand, is in our clock, we can early play the level 3 Astolfo, which really helps us keep board. It also denies our opponents their level 1 reverse combos. So like Aaron, for example, can't get a reverse if Astolfo's running back into our hand. That can really help disrupt our opponents, especially if we got to level 1 first as we wanted to. Astolfo's small, so we don't really want to face our opponent's level 1 combo. If we can help it, we would rather face a field of zeros. That's one of the reasons the Ricky is so important, so that we can get ourselves to level 1, so that we can get this combo off more easily. And the book trigger's fine. It pluses, which is good. Not an ideal trigger, I don't think, but certainly usable. This card is that Archer hand fix that uses the level flipping mechanic to let us get things from our waiting room. On play, flip a card in level and pitch 1 to salvage a character. Straight up hand fix in exchange for flipping over a card in our level. If we have that ruler in our back row that lets us flip cards in our level back over, essentially this is on play pitch 1 salvage. Really efficient, really easy to use. Key card in this deck because this card gets us almost everything. It gets all of our level 3s, it gets us our Astolfos for our combo. Just about anything that we need to fix our hand, this card can do it for us or get it for us. Really, really valuable card. We have to run 4 of it. One of the most important cards in the deck. The only other card we run at level 1 is this Bridal Chest Berserker of Black. We run 2 of these when an act ability is used, so like our Brainstormer, our Self-Tap Power Pump, and very importantly, that ruler that flips cards over in level. It gives itself on reverse blind stock. So we probably want to attack with this last so that we can pay out that blind stock on our next turn. Apocrypha doesn't have a lot of great stock building options. We don't run a stock soul, things like that. So sometimes it really helps to have that little bit of extra stock, especially because our endgame effects can be kind of expensive sometimes. This can help us get there, especially if the Astolfo combo doesn't happen for whatever reason. This gives us the stock that we need to use things like Brainstormers, the Drop Searcher, to help fix our hand and get us going again if we don't hit our combo. At level 2, we're trying to get early plays into the field that help us keep board and also get other pieces into play that give us more power and disrupt our opponent's compression. We run 2 different early plays, the first one being this Astolfo, Unleashing the True Name. I love this card, both mechanically and in terms of its design. I think the super rare is absolutely worth it. What it does is if it's in the front row at the beginning of your opponent's draw phase, it gives 4,000 power to any of your characters. It can give it to itself, get up to 14,000. It can give it to your other early play, get it into the 13,000s. More often than not, I use this ability on itself. It gives us something really big in the field at level 2 that's really hard to get rid of unless your opponent has some kind of anti-change. And as I said before, it's tied to having that level 1 Astolfo in your clock. And because that level 1 Astolfo is already bounced back into your hand if you were able to get the combo off, you clock it right away and you can put this onto the field. Fantastic card. I think it's super underrated. The other early play that we run is this level 3 ruler that helps us get other cards into the field. When there are 2 or fewer climaxes in waiting room, we can put this onto the field. On play, we draw a card, and we put any cost 1 character that's in our hand onto the stage for free. We'll talk about what those cards are specifically in a moment. Also, at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, you can pitch a card to add 2,000 power to any character. And we can get even bigger if we can get some of our other level 2 pieces onto the field that the Joan lets us bring into the stage for free. Specifically, this 2 on Astolfo before the duel. Again, we can just put it on stage for free when we play the ruler. It gives 2,000 power to the level 3 characters in front of it. And on play, we can pitch a card to go get our money counter from our waiting room. We'll talk about the money counter in just a second. The other card that we can bring in with the Joan is this 2/1 Lord Elmaloy. We only run 1 of these. When it enters the field, we can pay 1 and half Fumio. It helps decompress our opponents and land some big swings even before we get into our level 3 burn effects. The only other card that we run at level 2 is that money counter. It's a 2/4 event that we, again, can go get with that Astolfo. We only run 1 of these. What the money counter does is it picks a character in battle, and that character can do no damage to us during that turn. It's an expensive effect at 4 stock, but it can literally keep us alive for an extra turn. It also gives 1,500 to one of our characters as a backup, which helps us keep our field, especially if we have a level 3 that we want to keep alive. Level 3 is where we try to close the game out with burn effects. We have a combo and a couple of other pieces that help us get that damage in. Most importantly is that combo. Final Flash Saber of Red, we run 3 of these, 4 of the salvage trigger. This is where that level flipping mechanic pays off, because this card, on attack, flips over another card in our level and burns equal to the number of cards that are flipped over in our level. If we go into our combo turn with 1 card already flipped over in our level, we can attack with 2 of these, flip over 2 more cards in our level, and swing for 2 and 3 respectively, in addition to our regular swing. It is a pay 2 on attack effect, so it can be a little bit expensive, which is why we only run 3 of these. We're not going to try field this very often just because we usually won't have that much stock. It gets up to 14,000 on attack with the combo, and then still sits at 13,000 on our opponent's next turn. So not an easy card to remove from the field at all, especially if we have that Astolfo assist in the back row or some of our other assist cards that give more power. It's a tough out. It keeps its place on the board. It heals on play. A lot of really good things to like about this card. And on top of that, it's paired with a salvage trigger that can help us get our endgame set up. We have 2 other level 3s that we run that help us in different ways. This Demonetization Assassin of Black draws 2 on play, and we pitch 1. It can help us fish for climaxes to get our combo off, or maybe some other level 3 piece. On attack, we can pitch 2 to burn 1. Neither player can play backups during this card's battle. The other level 3 burn effect that we run is this La Pucelle Ruler. We run 1 of these as well. In addition to having 500 power for each of our other Master or Servant characters, we can pitch 1 on play to give it 6,500 power, which basically lets it reverse anything, as well as at the Encore step, it burns 1 before going to our waiting room. This can reverse just about anything that we put it up against. It can get into the 20,000 plus range with support from the back row. Massive, massive power on this card. It can also burn from anywhere on the stage, so if we have the stock, we can literally just put this card into our back row and pitch a card, and then at the Encore step, we burn 1. So if we have the resources and want to push for that extra point of damage, we essentially have pay 2, pitch 1, burn 1 at the Encore step built into this card. Super nice utility, does a couple of different things for us that really help us out, and really rounds out our level 3 game really, really nicely. So what this deck does really well is it has really high numbers near the end of the game, holds board for us really well, helps us keep our advantage on the stage, doesn't make it easy for our opponents to get reverses at levels 1 or 3. Our level 1 combo pluses us a lot of cards, and we also have a lot of really nice hand fix tools, especially that level 1 Archer, that can really help us get our endgame set up. And also the level 0 suite in Apocrypha is one of the best in English. Basically any level 0 profile you could possibly want in an English set, Apocrypha has it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. This deck does definitely have some problems, though. It really crutches on the Astolfo combo, really needs to get those reverses, or it can get behind in resources pretty easily. It's one of the reasons why we try so hard to get to level 1 early. But if we can't get that climax into hand, we have a really hard time generating advantage in the mid-game. It doesn't have a massive top end. It modulates really well, but it doesn't have the bombastic finishing effects of like a Konosuba or a Love Live Sunshine, where it can just roll a ton of damage on a ton of damage to finish from deep into level 2. It has a pretty strong finishing package, but it's not an over-the-top, amazing, world-shaking kind of endgame. And finally, sometimes the level 2 interactions in particular can be difficult to make happen, especially trying to get multiple different early plays into the field at the same time can be a little challenging because of trying to meet all of the early play conditions while also trying to keep an eye on clock and stock so that we refresh as compressed as we can. The deck does compress decently well, but there are a lot of interactions that need to be watched carefully as we make the transition from level 1 into level 2 and try to get our early plays down, and any deck that depends on early plays the way ours does can have trouble with anti-change counters and things of that nature. In the mid-game, our ideal stage is pretty straightforward. We want to try field the Astolfos with the combo if we can. It's super nice to have the two different Joans in the back row, the level flip and the self-tap, because the self-tap can help us get over larger opponents at level 1, and the self-tap helps us reset our level as we use those level 1 archers, and it also gives 500 power, which is nice. Also, potentially in this spot, that Frankenstein that lets us blind stock. If we do have one out, we will usually want to attack with that one last, just to make sure that it'll be easier to pay out the blind stock, because we don't know what that is. But overall, the level 1 is really straightforward, mostly trying to make sure we get that combo off. The endgame is less straightforward, mostly because we have the Astolfos and the Joans that we try to get onto the field early. We like to keep them in the field as much as possible if we can, but in any case, usually 1 to 2 Mordreds is pretty normal if we're able to get our endgame combo off, which we usually are. Ideally, we have one of the Astolfo assists in the back row as well. If we have the resources, we love to see the Joan in the back row just because it's a free burn 1. In any case, either the Joan or the Assassin that gives us that extra burn 1. Super nice to have, especially if we can't get multiple instances of our Mordred combo off. So as I mentioned before, this is a set that is full of options, especially at level 0. A lot of choices you can make here, a lot of good choices you can make here. This is very much a set out of which you can construct a deck that is very much in your playstyle, something that you want to run, profiles that you like, things like that. The core is going to be pretty consistent across the board. Most decks are going to run the Astolfo at level 1 and the Mordred at level 3, but what you do at level 0 entirely depends on what you want to build. There's a really good field advantage package at level 0 that starts with this Astolfo that bonds to the level 0 Sieg. The Astolfo, in addition to being a bond, is also a coin flip. At the beginning of our opponent's draw phase, we can look at the top card. If it's level 1 or higher, we can bring the Astolfo back into hand. The Sieg that the Astolfo bonds to mills 2 on play, gains 1,000 power for each character revealed, so it usually will sit at 4,000 or 5,000, making it one of the biggest level 0s in all of English. Tends to hold board really, really well. There's also the Astolfo Runner that a lot of people like out of the trial deck. These are great if you want to hold board at level 0 specifically. I don't run this package because I prefer the utility of having like the Rickies and the Frankensteins that can help fix my hand later on and compromise some of that board presence to have some of that utility. It's one of the reasons that I run the clean cut. It helps keep some of that level 0 board presence without committing as many cards to it as this setup does. This is, however, a very popular package, and it's a very good package. In addition to these are a couple of backups. There's the Frankenstein anti-change counter at level 2 and the Joan level 1 for 1,500. Both of these are also good if you want to include them. We already have so many built-in backup options, including the money counter, including the Astolfo and the ruler that can give power to themselves and other cards in the front row. I don't think the traditional backup is as necessary, but if you want to run one of, makes a lot of sense. There are a couple of decent profiles on the set. At level 1, there's an Assassin Bomb that also has Surveil. It top checks, leaves it on top, puts it on bottom of the deck. Fixes your triggers in that way, which can be really helpful, especially if you're trying to modulate damage, prevent your opponent from getting to a certain level, something like that. It's a bomb. It's really straightforward. You know what it does. There are a lot of other cards at level 1 in this list already. I'm not a huge fan of this profile, but if you like bombs, it's absolutely viable. A lot of good Apocrypha decks run this. The only other level 3 that's really worth mentioning, I think, is this Fafnir. It heals, and it can also give another character cancel burn. What some people will try to do is they'll try to run this kind of as its own package with the La Pucelle burn ruler at level 3. Sometimes in addition to the Mordred combo, sometimes as its own thing. Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz did a really great rush rundown talking about a couple of the different endgame options for this set back last week. We'll put a link in the description. It's a really good video. In short, this card heals on play, and the idea is that we try to stack cancel burns on the ruler so that we're burning multiple times with the ruler if and when that gets canceled, while also having these other vanilla swings. I'm not a huge fan of this package, but it's there, it exists, people run it, and it's worth thinking about if that's something you want to consider. Another card I want to briefly mention is this level 0 Lancer. If the overall cost of this deck is kind of daunting, which makes sense, this isn't as good of a profile as the On Death Akatsuki Frankenstein at level 0, but this does on play hand filter. So on play, look at the top card. If it's a master or servant character, add it to hand and then pitch one. Very useful profile. I really like this profile. It doesn't fit as well in this list just because we already have so much hand fix. But if you're looking for something to replace those Frankensteins because you don't want to shell out $80 for a playset, this is a decent card. It also has a nice little assist. Certainly a budget option if you're trying to build this set, but want to try to cut costs where you can. Finally, the last other card I want to talk about is this level 2 Lancer. It's an anti-level 3 bomb, essentially. Pretty straightforward. You could certainly run it with the ruler and drag it onto the field in that way. I find that the early plays that we already have in the list are sufficient for clearing other people's early plays by and large, but certainly an option. Again, a lot of lists run this usually as a one of, certainly worth thinking about. So finally, this is the list. Almost all the prices here are from TCG Player. Another good place to get cards for this set in particular is Strictly Broken. If, like me, you really like some of the SRs in this set, again, I'm a huge fan of the Astolfo SR. Also, the La Pucelle ruler that I run is an SR. Definitely brings up the price of the deck somewhat. I think a full play set of the Astolfos is like $35, and the rulers are in like the 10 to 12 range. So if you want to spend a little bit extra, I think those cards are really nice. Aside from that, TCG Player has pretty much everything except for the Frankenstein Akatskis. Those are available on Strictly Broken. Don't pay some of the exorbitant price gouges you see on TCG Player. I know some sellers will try to upcharge. If they're the only seller on TCG Player selling a certain card, they'll double the value or something and try to sell it at a ridiculously high price. Don't do that. There are almost always better options. JK is usually a good place to get stuff. Not a lot of Apocrypha stuff available at JK at the moment, which is why they're not mentioned on this list specifically. But Strictly Broken's a good place to get stuff. Usually TCG Player's a good place to get stuff. There's been some Apocrypha stuff showing up on the Facebook group as well. I'll link in the description to that. So usually also a good place to get stuff is that Facebook group. But yeah, multiple options available. The final price tag on this deck comes out in like the $325 to $350 range, including shipping. Again, if you want to take a chunk of that out, you could replace the Akatskis with those Lancers. All the prices on this, by the way, are base rarity, just to make that absolutely clear. At base rarity, as is, this deck costs about $325, $350, including shipping. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for checking out this list. I hope you find it interesting. On Thursday, Brandon and I will post gameplay featuring this Apocrypha deck going up against a couple other things. Please join us again for that. Thank you so much for watching this and for your support. It feels good to be getting back into deck techs again after spending so much time on the Weiss Schwarz Invitationals. So thank you very much for joining us. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with someone that you think might be interested. And until next time, have a good one.